Good morning, students. It is Friday, January 14th, and as far as I know, we'll all be returning back to school on Tuesday, so that will be really good news. I have a lesson I want to share with you today, basically stemming off of the video that you were supposed to watch. There is a video. It's called Brunelleschi's Experiment, and I put it in the file folder in Google Classroom in space after the 3 days of lecture that we've had, the 3 days of lecture videos. And if you haven't looked at it yet, go ahead after, just pause this video actually and go into it and look at Brunelleschi's experiment. And it's a quick video. It's about 4 minutes long, and it explains how Brunelleschi invented linear perspective. He was in Florence, Italy, and he drew an image of the Florence baptistry. And he drew it with incredible accuracy. And he used a mirror in his experiment. And he also used a hole in a painting. So be sure to watch that. After you've watched it, come back into this video, okay? Unpause this video, and we will go ahead and look at our lesson for today. And when you come back on Tuesday, we're going to do some actual drawings. All right, so that'll be exciting for sure. I'll go ahead and load this up into Google Classroom, but this is a nice description that goes into a little bit more detail with some images of the illusion of depth. Okay, so that's the trick. That's the thing that artists try to do. They try to make the illusion of depth on a flat two-dimensional surface. And ways to do that, there's numerous ways. One way is, if you look under the glossary terms, one-point perspective, which we looked at that when we went through our space lecture. And linear perspective, again, Brunelleschi invented it, used in combination with a single vanishing point. Now you have a horizon line, that's where the sky touches the ground, but there's going to be a point on the horizon, just a dot, okay? And that's a vanishing point. So it's used to show three-dimensional objects on a two-dimensional surface. Two-point perspective is another way to show three-dimensional objects on a two-dimensional surface. And you have your horizon line, but you have 2 points, one on one end and one on the other end, where the diagonal lines go to, or the orthogonal lines. And these forms are seen from an angle and have 2 receding sides. So you're going to have a front leading edge in those type of images. And then perspective, that's an artist's representation of a three-dimensional world on a two-dimensional surface. So depending on what your perspective is and where you're at in a room, you're going to see an object differently. So if I'm on one side of this cup, I might see the handle. But if I go around the cup and I have a different perspective of the cup, I don't see the handle anymore. But what if I move my orientation and walk around the cup again? Now I can see the front of the cup, but the handle's on the other side, okay? So depending on your orientation in a room, your perspective is going to determine how that object will look. And then a broader definition for linear perspective in general, the technique by which artists create the illusion of depth on a flat surface. All parallel lines of projection converge at a vanishing point. So they're going to go together at a vanishing point in the background, in the distance. And associated objects are rendered smaller the farther from the viewer that they are intended to be seen. So the further back things go in the distance, the smaller they become. Now, although artists may paint or draw, sorry, I didn't mean to go up that fast. Although artists may paint or draw on a flat surface, they often create the illusion or appearance of depth. And basically, to achieve this effect, they may choose from a variety of both simple and complex devices. Artists today often employ a combination of methods to create the illusion of depth. So you already know that shading, cast shadows, sorry, I have a typo here, I have to fix that. That shading, cast shadows help to make a shape appear to have roundness or three-dimensionality. The techniques described in the following pages can help you create a greater sense of depth on a flat picture plane. So let's go ahead and look at the next image. Here we have a piece. This is an old piece. This is from the mid-16th century, and it's called The Meeting of Theologians, and it's watercolor on paper. It's actually in a gallery in Kansas City at the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art. And we get the illusion of depth in this piece because you have what looks like an architectural structure higher up in the picture plane, and then you have these figures sitting in front of it, but then you have these figures that are closer to the bottom of the picture plane, and then these figures down at the very bottom. So this is kind of an interesting image. This miniature, it's really small. It's 11 inches by 7 inches roughly. The artist worked with space in two different ways. So the many patterns prevent an illusion of depth because there is overlapping of forms. Since these figures are in front of these figures, you know that there's some space occurring. That's called overlapping, one of the techniques we learned about previously. And basically, the many patterns prevent an illusion of depth. So how is the viewer made to understand the arrangement of figures in space? There's so many patterns in this piece, and this is common of artwork from more of the Middle East area. Basically, and it's abstract. So when people make abstract art, they break the physical laws of physics, all right? So it looks like there's two different scenes. This is a scene that looks like it's on the outside of the church, and maybe this scene is on the inside of the church, okay? So again, this becomes a little bit narrative. We're telling a story here. If we know more about the painting, we'd know more about the story. Okay, now let's go, but there's definitely depictions of space, and it's shallow space, okay? There's not a big infinite space in the background. We have a building in the background here and a door in the background here, so it is shallow space, a shallow depth of field. Okay, here we have another image. This is by Vanessa Bell. It's called Abstract Painting, and she uses gouache on canvas. How is a sense of depth communicated in this purely abstract painting? Okay, it's so abstract, for me it's non-objective because I can't even say what it is. It's just squares and rectangles on a golden background, okay? But if you look over here, there is some overlapping. There's some overlapping of these blue rectangles, and there's some overlapping with this more grayer blue with the brighter blue on top of it. So we get an illusion of space through overlapping, okay? Now, that brings us to talking about nonlinear methods. If we're not going to use linear perspective or oblique projection like we talked about yesterday, position, overlapping, size variation, color, and value. Those are all nonlinear methods for creating the illusion of space. So place an object or a shape higher on the page to make it seem further away. In this diagram, let's see, is there, oh, here's the diagram that I'm referring to. Okay, so there's two cats right here. So everything that's typed out right here is exactly the same as what's in the diagram, okay? It's just really small font, and so I typed it out so you could see it better. So place an object or shape higher on the page to make it seem further away. So in this diagram, the cat on the left seems closer than the cat on the right because it's higher in the picture plane. The one lower in the picture plane seems closer to the viewer. Number 2, overlapping. Place one shape on top of another to produce a feeling of depth. So in this diagram, the apple, the top shape, appears to be in front of the orange. So here we have an apple in front of an orange, okay? So the apple feels closer to us. Now then, size variation. Combine similar objects of different sizes. The smaller objects will seem further away than the larger ones. So when we look at this illustration, the trees basically in nature seem to become smaller as they recede back into the distance. And this is using linear perspective to create that illusion. I'll teach you guys how to do that when you get back to class and we start some linear perspective drawings. And then color. Use color to create a sense of depth. A shape of bold color on a more neutral colored background appears to move forward, okay? Warmer colors tend to move forward, cooler colors tend to recede in the background. That's a trick to use. And then value, use different values. Lighter values tend to recede behind darker ones. So in a landscape, you might use increasingly lighter shadows of blue to create the illusion of a hazy atmosphere in the distance. So here we have a little image of what looks like hills or mountains, and the ones in the foreground are darker because shadows are darker in the foreground, but the further the mountains get, the hazier, the lighter in value they become. And sometimes they blend in with the sky and you can't even see the distant mountains. Okay, now we're going to talk about linear perspective a little bit more in detail. So the method of depicting three-dimensional space on a two-dimensional surface is called perspective. And when artists use lines to create depth, they are using linear perspective. So here's an example of a one-point linear perspective. Here's a horizon line. Here is a box that's drawn. And basically the edges go to that one vanishing point, okay? And you can look at this a little bit more closely. I'm about to run out of time on this video and I want to get everything in this video. So here's an example of an actual photograph where the edges of this building recede back into the distance, the top and the bottom. So the vanishing point is going to be about right here, and then this pole in the foreground, the edges of it go back to that vanishing point, okay? So there it is in an actual photograph. And then here is a painting called Bonaire, and you can see linear perspective is used in this painting to depict what looks like an iced over pathway. And then we have two-point linear perspective where you have 2 points on the horizon line and all of the orthogonal or diagonal edges go back to that vanishing point. Okay, so here, and this painting that you see right here, this is an example of one-point linear perspective as well. It's a beautiful painting from the Renaissance era from 1480. So here we have some examples of two-point linear perspective. And take your time to read this. I'm about out of time. But watch the video with Brunelleschi, read the rest of this material, and I will have some review questions that you'll need to answer for your assignment for today. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.